And this is a fascinating case study for a few reasons. Firstly, many people have roles in PropTech and they're in an industry, they're in business, and there you are, you ran a pest control company, and now you're running a whole platform, really, as I call it, or as I call it, extermination as a service, sort of making that term up there. And if you dive into Valpas as a case study, what you see is you don't just have a hardware product. You've got a hardware product that is sold and positioned for these hospitality owners. There's a recurring revenue component. There's a reporting for owners and real-time reporting too, where people can log on and see things. And then you've got this whole consumer-facing application. So really, this is a platform. And you don't go and build that because you suddenly had that idea. You built that because you talked to people. You really tried to get to the bottom of what is the pain point we're solving. How do you position this product?
Absolutely.
So back to the difference between product and technology and what I would say product marketing. How did you avoid your biases? Because you're going to have a bias. You ran a successful pest control company and you had an exit and you sold it. It's very easy to dismiss feedback from people. Very easy to look at the world the way you want to look at it. Did you encounter that problem of bias when you did your validation?
Yeah, I think everyone is subject to bias, and myself and our team included. However, not for the reason that you mentioned, because we actually, we were complete outsiders to the pest control industry. As I, mentioned, I just had a bad experience in my travels and wanted to kind of fix it in a better way. And it's actually funny because we were just starting our master's studies at university at Aalto in Helsinki and LSE in London. And I'm a finance major. And so I used to work in a bank, as an investment analyst and manager. And, when I started the company, the extermination company, my friends and finance buddies were like, yeah, what's wrong, man? What's this thing with bed bugs? Like, are you okay, dude? And they were like, what's happening? So this is just to kind of illustrate that,
just to joke on that point. You hear stories of burned out people in banking, consulting, law, whatever, even and they go and start a bakery shop. They go and start, a florist or whatever. And there you are, you're going down the other extreme, starting a pest control company.
Yeah. So really, there was no bias coming from pest control. We kind of, and the reason why we started the heat treatment company too was that I kind of saw since day one bed bugs as a problem of travel, because it spreads among people, especially when you travel, and hospitality providers are at the center are at the center of the spreading problem, and could also at the same time be the solution because of the high turnover of people. So the rationale was that if hotels and hospitality providers or temporary living providers would be safe, if they would stop problems from spreading from there on, households wouldn't have a problem either. So this was the kind of idea there. And so, sure, we do have our biases, but not like from that pest control side, because that's actually precisely what we came from the outside, and we wanted to completely just rethink it. I think in general, it's the first step is just understanding that there are some bias. You have some bias, accepting it, and then the second one is, I think, self-awareness is the next step. Is understanding why do you think a certain way and why do you feel a certain way in certain kinds of situations, and that comes from self-awareness and understanding where you're coming from and why you are thinking it this way. And then the third step, once you're there, is just poking the other holes. So understanding that, if you have a blank paper, your kind of point of view or your idea is maybe, I don't know, a small chunk of it, then going through, okay, what are the other angles to this particular topic or this insight or this feedback, and then going like all over it, and then until you feel that, okay, now it's been kind of as unbiased as we possibly can, and the situation kind of justifies for it.
Can you expand on that? Maybe give us an example so I can understand the third step in your. Well, could you repeat the 3 steps for the benefit of everyone, and then give us a sort of concrete example on that last step?
Yeah. So okay, for step number 1 is just understanding that we all have our kind of biases. We all have our unique point of views through which we look at things. The second one is through self-awareness, understanding like why would you in a particular situation think first like this? And then the third one is understanding, and going through the other options that could be, or the other angles that could be there, that you don't kind of automatically switch to because you have your own biases, but that could be there. Maybe a concrete example. Can't think of anything quick right now, but
it's a good framework, and I'll give you an example for me then using that framework. I grew up as a teenager making money building websites and making money from ads on these websites. And in some ways, I tasted the advertising industry. I saw the web industry grow, and I saw how desktop ads work. When the mobile revolution was happening, I did come with a bit of a bias. I thought, ads should be a certain way. And even more so, I found that anyone I asked for feedback who was in the traditional game of desktop advertising were full of biases.
Yeah.
This will never work. Mobile will never work, and this is how things need to be done. And so when the mobile revolution was taking off, people tried to take what they knew about desktop, okay? A cookie-based world where you've got a big screen and you scroll down, you take that mindset and you just adapt it and you bring it to mobile. It doesn't work like that. A mobile phone is dynamic. You don't really do as much scrolling. There's this new thing called an application. The screen sizes are so small. In those days, people were plugged in, hardwired internet connection. Here you're on a mobile phone where, connection can be a problem, especially as the mobile industry was taking off. And so I came in with my biases, but I spoke to customers, and like you, I realized, don't talk to the people in the advertising industry because they're full of bias, and I wasn't getting anything from my customer validation. So I talked to ad agencies, I talked to advertisers. I decided, let me talk to the actual consumers. Let me talk to people who are using mobile phones and what they don't like about ads. Okay, these ads are intrusive. They show up on your screen and you accidentally click on it. And then you talk to the developers, the people that are putting the ads, and they're struggling. They don't have a solution. It was then I realized, okay, so that's the problem. I come from the desktop advertising industry. I now am self-aware. I understand there are biases. Now, what are the other things I need to sort of plug in? What are the other perspectives? And by talking to different stakeholders, I realized, wow, there's this whole opportunity. And that's why I built, a startup called Vungle, which eventually did very well and got to hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. But it came from that process. That's why I was fascinated with the framework you outlined there. It's a framework that can be used, especially if you have a bias. Because if you have a bias, you can miss an opportunity. There's this, I don't know, I'm sure our viewers will know this, especially people that like to trade. Seems like everyone likes to trade these days. One of these books, I don't know if it's called A Random Walk on Wall Street or whether it was by Peter Lynch or...
Okay.
One of these books talked about sometimes the best people who do really well in an industry and invest in companies are ones who don't come from that industry. The outsiders make really good stock picks. And the insiders are biased and they tend to underperform as industry experts in finding stocks to pick on. You're nodding. Does this resonate with you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's the outside of the box thinking. You're not kind of restricted by the ideas and the omnipresent traditional way of doing things. You come there with a different skill set, different experiences, different way of looking at things, and then normally something new happens. But even then, just to give an example now, I think your example was really good and it put my brain to work again at 8 p.m. after a long day here. But even then, an example when we started the first heat treatment company, we were like 22, 23, when we started, and we didn't have really any experience from B2B. We were like, all the brands that we knew were consumer brands, all the companies we knew were consumer brands. So our first impulse, our first bias was to just do, customer acquisition by online marketing. Just, do a great website, SEO, Google Ads. Okay, let's get the orders in. And we were really good at it at first. But then there was kind of a threshold after which we could not grow more. And we have kind of exhausted our initial approach that our bias led to it. And it was only later that we understood that, hey, we actually need to we need to also add the B2B side and the B2B sales to this, which was something we were completely oblivious to because we didn't come from that side. We didn't understand it at all. And then eventually we actually started doing also B2B sales to these real estate maintenance companies that actually order bedbug heat treatments and exterminations into flats and multi-family housing, or the equivalent of it here in Finland. And then only after that we then made the next kind of growth leap in that first company. But this is something that now when you say it out loud, it's like obviously, but even something like this can be subject to your to those initial biases, and it's only after looking back that it feels like, hey, this is obvious. How didn't we get there sooner?
Yeah, in the spirit of talking in threes, I'll sort of define 3 paths here. Your first path, and although this is fraught with a lot of high risk, some of the greatest returns come from this area. But you've got people that are outside of the industry, naive, and they go and create a company, and that company is so different than what the industry is used to that it's disruptive. The fact that Facebook came along, the fact that Tesla came along, they're so different to what exists in the industry, right? So that's one path.
Yeah.
The other path I see are experienced people who understand a problem firsthand. They build an underwhelming solution. They're full of bias and they don't do anything disruptive. And worse, they build something that is so small or doesn't take off. And that's it. Now, the third path is a combination here where you can get the best of both worlds. If you have that experience, if you understand the industry, where you can come in as a newborn baby does, full of receptivity, full of trying to learn and coming in, removing your biases, understanding what your biases are. Once you find that problem, bring on the cavalry, bring on your connections, bring on your experience. You will grow so much faster than the previous, 2 examples of entrepreneurs on that path. So that's the playbook, and that framework you outlined was great.
Yeah, I to add on to this, I think it's super important still to have that expertise, or if you don't have it, that subject matter expertise, of the problem that you're solving. And you might not have it as a legacy. You might actually experience a problem and then start developing that subject matter expertise, but you need to have it. That's for sure. But then, and this is the part that I feel that some kind of individuals or companies that come from a very kind of singular track record, or like being just in one industry for their whole lifetimes and then doing something, is that they become the expert in the subject matter, yes, but then the actual user who you are developing that solution, that kind of gets lost or is neglected. And I think you need to be, and this is again coming back to that earlier equation that product equals technology plus positioning. Another kind of equation or way of thinking is that in order to kind of create this revolutionary, highly mass adopted product, you need to have the subject matter, and then you also need to have the user, understanding your users. And I think that's a part that's equally important as the subject matter, sometimes even greater, because just the experience of using a product can actually lead people to prefer the product, even if some other product might be a bit more effective or efficient or so on. So it's super important.
Get your MVP, get your prototype, get some functional version in the hands of a consumer or a customer, and go from there, build around that feedback.
Yeah, absolutely. And you need to, and even after you've shipped, you need to constantly spend time, or some of your, founding team needs to spend time in discovery. And by discovery, I mean customer discovery, so that you kind of keep developing that product towards that product vision that you have, and always, keep finding those problems that the customers are facing and ways of better helping them with them.
Exactly. Martin, this has been a fun conversation. Sort of to round up here, concluding thoughts. What does the future of the industry looks like? I know at one point you used an analogy of a vaccine. A vaccine cannot physically work, because if someone's vaccinated against bed bugs, that just means that they will constantly be bitten and they won't know. And as you said, 10 to 15% of consumers are immune to bed bugs.
No, but what I mean, Zain, what I mean by that is that you don't spread the problem after that. So basically, yeah, that's the point. Yeah. So we're basically vaccinating real estate for bed bugs, so that, once they get into the real estate, they don't spread. They don't become a problem for anyone.
That's the danger with using a human analogy. When we look at the world like that, real estate could be vaccinated. You're right, through products and services. I mean,
out of the box thinking.
Out of the box thinking. There we go. That's positioning right there.
Yeah.
Everyone listening to this will be very impressed. But I think this is it really. This is a big asset class, and there are so many unsolved problems. And the last thing you think about, it's even you don't know what you don't know, is something absolutely. Like biological issues like pest. Everyone's now jumping on the green climate trend and decarbonization of things, and especially with in the US at least, President Biden's $2 trillion infrastructure plan, and countries around the EU and everywhere are mandated to cut things down. But problems like this can go unserved and unnoticed, and it might sound like a niche, but if you solve a niche no one wants to be in, that's great. There's less competition and you can innovate there.
Yeah, I absolutely agree on Peter Thiel's comment that competition is for losers. Just try to create a product that's so superior to everybody else that it just creates its own category and grows there. That said, Valpas does have considerable environmental impact too, because remember those tangible losses, so the refurbishing of rooms. So every single prevented bedbug incident basically prevents on average 1 ton of carbon equivalents. So that's the same as one person switching to a vegan diet for a full year. Plus then we avoid the use of pesticides that are harmful for also not just our health, but also the environment. So there is actually a slight carbon impact there too.
Thank you. Martim, how can people reach you?
Martim at valpas.io, or then just hit me up on LinkedIn.
How do we spell your name?
Martim, Martim, at valpas.io. Valpas is actually Finnish, means thoughtful, which is our mission, advancing thoughtful travel. And yeah, you can just hit me up on LinkedIn. Please follow Valpas on LinkedIn or Instagram to get to know the safe new hotels that we enlist later this year.
Great. Martin, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you. It was a pleasure, Zain.